Hi, everybody, and welcome to the newest edition of Let Me Introduce You. I'm Marion Roach Smith, and we're here today for an hour to introduce you to a great resource for all of you. And I hope you're there, happy. You're not in snow like I am, but why don't you do me this favor and just tell me in the questions box, if you can find the questions box, if you can hear me and if you can see the screen. You won't see me and Diane. Diane and I are just about as zoomed out as you are. Not going to be doing any more Zoom meetings today. But if you can hear and see, that would be great. And you're going to find that questions box anyway, because later that's where you're going to put your questions. So great. Oh, look, here we've got Kitty and Heather and Kathy and Sarah, Jody, Audrey, Jody again. Wonderful. Betsy, Elmira, Heather, Pamela, Portia, Abigail. This is great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Look at you all. Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, well, you can just sit back and relax. We're going to be here for an hour. You're going to get a recording of this. You'll have it delivered to your email box from GoToWebinar 24 hours after we get off the call. So you can watch it forever. And these kinds of recordings, I love you to share with your friends if you can, so that they can learn too about writing through and around recovery. But before we let any more time go, let's just jump in. So where you're here with me, I'm Marion Roach Smith. I started and run and teach at the Memoir Project. And I'm going to introduce you in a second to Diane Cameron. She's an author, columnist, writer, teacher, creativity coach, and a spiritual director. And her newspaper columns have appeared in the Times-Union of Albany, New York, and lots of other newspapers around the country. She's the author of 3 beautiful books, including Out of the Woods, A Woman's Guide to Long-Term Recovery, which is the one I'm featuring here today, because this is really why we're here today. I've known Diane for a long time. She does a beautiful job in coaching people through recovery writing, and she helps people find meaning, perspective, and encouragement, especially those identifying as spiritual but not religious. So, Diane, welcome.
I am so happy to be here. Hi, Marion.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. So thank you for coming along. So we're going to talk all about this idea of writing in and around recovery. And I think it really starts with this question. And that's true or false. Writing about recovery can assist the recovery process, and the recovery process can inform the writing. What do you think, Diane?
Yes, I think both are absolutely true. And if folks who are joining us today are in any kind of recovery, most traditional 12-step recovery, but other kinds of recovery as well, they know we talk about the tools. And one of the tools in almost all 12-step programs is writing, keeping a journal, doing a gratitude list, writing down your resentments, working them through. Sometimes we share it with others, sometimes we don't. We just do it for that. So it's a key part of recovery. But then also, and I think this happens for many people, as they're doing that kind of journaling, they like a phrase or they like a sentence or they realize part of their story and they think, do I have something here that could be bigger? Could I do more with this?
That's a beautiful reminder. They like a phrase or they like a sentence. And honestly, I need to reassure everyone that that's how books are born. That's how blog posts, essays, op-eds, long form essays, and books are born. Just one little phrase. And that's such a reassuring thing. Has that happened to you?
Absolutely. One of the things that I have learned to do is I have a mini tape recorder in my car, because a lot of times when you're doing a non-writing thing, that's when the good phrases come.
I'm chopping vegetables. It's always when I'm chopping
something
vegetables.
Repetitive, yeah. And so a phrase will go through my head. I had the painful experience of thinking, I'll remember that later. And of course, it's gone for good. Pull up that little baby tape recorder and catch it. And then out of that comes something bigger.
That's so lovely. I hadn't thought of a baby tape recorder. I've got a notepad tied to the dashboard of my car. There's one in the bathroom, one next to the bed. There's 3 in my purse. I put a picture up on Instagram recently of all the notebooks of my life, and it's really scary to see them all. So, so talk a little bit about how writing about recovery can assist in the recovery process and how the recovery process can inform the writing.
Well, I think that in recovery, one of the things that's going to happen automatically is you're going to change and grow. And we say sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but it's going to change. You're going to change emotionally. You're going to change psychologically. And we know now you're changing neurologically as well. And as you become aware of that, or friends and family may say, you're kind of different. They see something you used to maybe blow up over and you didn't this time, or you're treating a relationship differently, and you're capturing that in your writing, in your journal, your diary, whatever that is. And that's going to help you. And also going back in recovery, going back and looking at the earlier journals and saying, oh, I used to do that. I used to be like that.
Yeah.
And now I'm not.
Yes, to see the progress. And really, recovery covers so much. And I want to be really inclusive here. It's not, it's absolutely alcohol and drugs, but there's sex, there's shopping, there's, and you have this beautiful thing you talk about now. I'm watching this Instagram series of yours on sober money that I just love. So talk a little bit about what kind of recovery there, what just the breadth of recoveries there are. So that person who's sitting there going, am I in recovery or not? Who's listening in might feel the assurance of
Right.
that.
Well, the phrase that I use is, and I grabbed it for myself very early on because I knew there was more than one thing going on in my life, all-encompassing recovery.
Mm.
Because I started in Overeaters Anonymous, I knew I had food issues. That led to alcohol because I was hiding my alcohol in desserts. I thought I was just
Oh.
having dessert, but there was always alcohol in that pretty dessert.
Mm.
And then very quickly, other people could see it in my relationships. They could see how it was with partners, shopping, money, thinking. There are some kinds of thinking, like worry can be described as an addiction, perseveration, those kinds of things. It's the same behavior. And what I really believe, why I like the all-encompassing word, is that whatever we use to not feel our feelings.
Oh, I love that,
So
Diane.
work, and many of our addictions,
What?
many addictions are so socially supported and
Yes.
approved. Workaholism, people pleasing, gift giving.
Uh-oh, you are so nailing me to the.
Oh, these are my nails. These are mine.
Oh, we're nailing one nail, two women.
Yes, exactly. Or, a lot of, women, men too, but women, traditionally in early recovery, they haven't been taking care of themselves physically or their clothes. And all of a sudden they discover I can get some pretty outfits. I could get my hair done. I could buy some makeup, and then I'm going to buy some more makeup and some more makeup. And I'm going to go to a fancier salon, and I'm going to do this and that. And this is where also we need other people or maybe some outside help to figure out where's the line there. What is self-care and what is tipping toward an addiction and those kinds of things.
That's fabulous. So that I can see myself in the other people's writing, because if they look at it as an all-inclusive, you've got a story there that's going to have all-inclusive readers. And that's a really fabulous thing to remember. So all manners of recovery, and then they breed out, they multiply out. That's fantastic. And so as you write, you sort of run into some of these. So let's talk about who's on the line today. So I think one of the things that I know from teaching and writing memoir for a very long time is that people frequently think you have to wait till you have everything figured out to write about it. And if I had done that, I would never have published my first book at 26, never have published anything I've published, certainly never published any of my memoir, a memoir writing from being a parent or being a spouse or being a dog owner or being a fly fisher or whatever. So let's talk about who these people are that are listening, and all of our friends out there today. They could be considering recovery. In other words, they could not yet actively be in it. It could be new to recovery, someone who is years into recovery. But talk to the audience, please, a little bit about where you can be to start writing.
Really, I think you can be almost anywhere, because I've seen some lovely things written by people. I mean, they talk about the traditional stages of change. So the first conscious one is pre-contemplation. I wonder if I should look at my drinking. I wonder if I have a problem with money. I wonder if this is an issue. So that's pre-contemplation.
That's beautiful.
Before
Pre-contemplation.
more details come
Love
at
that.
you. But I think it's true. I think for each of us, our self-examination on the page is going to be helpful to somebody else. And that's what tipped me ultimately toward the book Out of the Woods. I thought, I can't be the only one who feels like this. I was 14, 15 years into recovery, and I was noticing some things, and I thought, and in the rooms where we go to meetings, I didn't hear people saying these things, because it was like, part of the ethic there is we're all the same amount sober, whoever got up earliest this morning. But I thought, yeah, but at 14 years, I'm doing some of this differently. Am I doing it bad or wrong? And then one of the things that I noticed, the conversations in the parking lot were the more real conversations.
Oh, I love that realization. I totally get that.
And that is what has gotten me to the new book that I'm working on about money and recovery. And I'm calling it Sober Money, but it is all kinds of recovery and money, because again, we joke about money in meetings, in the rooms, we're like, maybe we've blown some money or somebody had problems, but the tears are in the parking lot or in the private conversation with a sponsor or sober friends. And I thought, let's bring that back into the light, because people are suffering.
That is so generous and so helpful, because I was talking to a writer recently who's very new to recovery, and she was writing a very different book than a writer I had just dealt with who was 20 years out, who was writing from there. And what the newer person was noticing were those brain changes, those startling, it felt like new neural pathways, she said, but she didn't feel comfortable amid that change. She said, well, if I'm changing this rapidly, I have no authority. And I said, oh, no, 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 no. You have enormous authority right from here that might best be shared with everybody right this moment. Because imagine the community that's out there that, who are they going to talk to about this?
Right.
Like you're going to say to your spouse, I think I'm getting smarter now that I'm sober. Well, that person just wanted you to stop drinking, right? Their lives depended on you to stop drinking or shopping or
Right.
sexing or whatever. And they're not really engaging in that conversation necessarily. They just needed you to stop drinking, they think. Well, they're also going to be living with a very different person.
Right.
And chronicling that, I think, is essential for our understanding. What do you think?
Right. Well, that I think the authority is right in that, who you are right now, telling your truth, because I think the truth is the authority, right? So I'm going to tell you
Yes,
on the
that's
page,
beautiful.
at the podium, what my truth is in the moment, because
Right.
somebody out there is going to relate to that. And so what we're basically saying is, I'm in the middle of this thing, whatever it is, 15 years of recovery or 90 days or 15 months. Come with me. Follow me
Oh,
while I figure it out and show you
that's
where
beautiful.
I'm going.
That's so beautiful. And I think authority, I think you just said it perfectly. I think the authority is in the invitation. It's not necessarily in the completed task that's all tidy and you can ready to put a bow on it. I get nervous when people are writing from a final product and I'm just in the beginning of it. And I want that immediate authority that, like, I noticed this. I'm having this. In fact, one of the most interesting topics I find in recovery is how the family wants you to recover, but then they're not willing to tolerate the person who's sober.
Right.
That person who has ambition again and is doing these and wants to speak with their voice of authority. And they're like, no, no, you're a drunk. Well,
Right.
but I'm supposed to be allowed to evolve.
Right. And I think there too, I mean, I think sort of the good advice in recovery is extend the invitation to them, to family and friends. Come to an occasional meeting with me, meet my sober friends. Like
Right,
there's a journey going on here, and at least take a peek at it
right,
so I don't scare you.
right. So I don't scare you. And it may be, if you married addicted, there may be some breakups there,
Yeah.
who knows. But so all of these people, the person who's brand new, the person who's considering, the person who is years into, what do they all have in common? They have a story we want to hear. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that you can write from anywhere but write. So let's just deal with this one thing, because now I know all the people listening to this right now are doing the same thing. They're going, yeah, but there's this book out there. And maybe this is the greatest of all time books, Drinking a Love Story by Caroline Knapp. So the question is there room for another book on the shelves? And I deal with this every single day, to which I always say this. So can you speak to this?
Absolutely. Caroline Knapp's book is extraordinary and beautiful. But most of us are not young women, brilliant in Boston with a dog and the best friend. She's a very good person to read, because what she shows us in that book is how she discovered what was going on inside of herself and took those first brave, awkward steps toward recovery. For somebody who has, let's say, 35 years, they're going to admire that and appreciate that. But they want, what do I do now that I'm 65 with 35 years of recovery? What is my life like now? Who can
Right.
I read? Who can I hear from?
Yeah, I think that's true. And this is the reason that there are categories on the bookstore shelves, is because, and they're getting refilled constantly, people. So there's a recovery category and you want to be on that shelf. There are some number of hundred pieces, books published each year in this country on recovery. There are also some number of hundred books published on that dogs do things for people that people can't do for themselves, and getting through a chronic illness with a spouse. And you want to be part of the conversation.
Right.
Is
Because
what I
we
say to
know if
people.
you stay that there's an old joke in recovery is, how do you get to be an old timer? Don't drink and don't die. Well, and we laugh, right? We laugh. And I always say, like, and it's kind of funny, except I always say there's fine print that we don't look at. So if you don't drink and you don't die for a long time, life is going to happen. You will get married, and I want to know what marriage is like in
Right.
recovery. I want to know what divorce is like. I want to know what single parenting is like. I want to know what adopting a child is like if you're a person in recovery. Getting a job, losing a job, changing careers, all of those can be recovery books and stories.
Mm-hmm.
Those perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like in the workplace? What was it like when you retired? Because if you don't drink and you don't die, then you're going to have to deal with your 60s and 70s, maybe your 80s. And we know, especially women, stuff happens to your body. And who's talking about menopause and recovery?
Mm-hmm.
Who's talking about all the physical changes that we go through, right? I can't turn to Carolyn Knapp for that story,
Right.
but I want to read somebody who is older, in recovery, dealing with those things. Give me some inspiration. Show me the breadcrumbs. Show me the stepping stones for my
Yeah.
recovery.
Absolutely. That's beautifully put. And I so agree. I mean, for everybody that had something that helped them along, that reassured them, the addiction, the shopping, the even though we know it doesn't really, but in the moment it does, the drinking, or you can even in active addiction, you can say, well, how could I write a book? And I'm drunk all the time. Yeah. Well, it gets over and you get this ambition back and you want to do this and you think, oh, right. What am I going to do as I age? What am I going to go to comfort me as I deal with this changing body? And I think this is a perfect example of the continuum of recovery literature and the
Right.
opportunity. So people, there's lots and lots of things that people can write to. And so I want to talk with you about your skills because you're a writing coach and you have this beautiful statement on your website that says, as a writing coach, I am like your athletic coach or personal trainer. We start where you are and build writing muscle in practice. I love that. I'll help you by providing safe, respectful, and supportive feedback. And you talk about quieting the negative voices, and those are voices all creatives have, and help you know that you are a writer and your story is worthy. Now, there is the word. We just land on worthy. And you're going to suit up and show up on the page. Okay, so you combine that wonderful promise with this spiritual direction that you took on. And so I want to know, how does your spiritual direction experience inform what you know about how to write through and around recovery? Talk to me about your authority because it's unique in my experience with recovery writing.
Right. Well, each of these things came as I sort of lived through, and I became a writing coach because people in recovery were saying to me, I think maybe sometimes I wonder if I could possibly write a book, write a column, write an article. And, so it's like, what's the baby step?
Mhm.
Do you write? Do you have a piece of paper and a pen? Is there something you can do? And I found that I was able to do that, to encourage people to do that. And then similarly with spiritual direction, I was always attracted to that because I have wrestled with my own spiritual life. And in recovery, we are told, pretty early on, find something bigger than you. If you're not a psychopath and you're not a narcissist, something's bigger than you. And the 12-step programs are very generous in saying, doesn't have to be God. It can be the doorknob. It can be the group. It can be whatever it is, because it's like, come join in. Let's
Mhm.
come in here and do this. And one of the things that I always say to people, because I work with a lot of people, they are attracted to me, who identify as agnostic or atheist. And
Mm.
so I say, so what's your bigger? I call it your bigger. And people will say, well, it's the ocean, it's the woods, it's trees. And then I say, okay, people who have traditional religions, in a way, they have an advantage because the script is delivered to them.
Mhm.
Say these prayers, sing these songs, go to this building at least once a week, do these rituals. If the ocean is your higher power, now you have to create the
Mm.
prayers, the rituals, the practices. And I often will say to people, if the ocean or the trees are your higher power, are they on your screensaver? Do you have a picture in your, like religious people have pictures and statues and all kinds of things? You should have those too, because you want the reminder of what is bigger than you. Like that helps you manage your ego and your relationship with others. Let's find your practices. Let's find your connection to what is bigger than you,
Hmm.
you
I
know?
think that's so beautiful. And you're right. I've never thought of the dogma of the church, of course, is provided. It's there. You've got the prayers, you got
You
the
got a
songs, you got the
book,
thing,
literally got a
you
book.
literally have a handbook, right? And so if my first getting people to that admission of what is their higher power, oh my goodness, that's giving people permission to really step in and identify what it is. I mean, you're sitting here in my office right now with me, and my my desk is littered with these little totemic things that I need to have near me to work. So how much resistance do you get from people when, or do they just fall right into that when you ask them to identify their higher power?
Most people can say it within a second. If I say, what is your bigger?
Yeah.
I don't say God or higher
Right.
power in the beginning, but say, what is bigger than you? And they're like, well, always when I go in the woods, I touch a tree, or when I go to the ocean, and this is true for me, like my whole body changes. The first minute my feet go in the sand, my body changes. I know that's bigger than me. I know I can't control that thing.
Mm.
Um,
What is your bigger? That's fabulous. And later when we're taking questions, if anyone just wants to identify for us, they're bigger. And so what's your bigger?
what is my bigger? It's a combination, because I grew up Methodist, so I got pretty good language, lots of songs. Methodists are
They
singers.
have good
They
music.
have really good music. And then I drifted away, and then I tried all kinds of things. Then I came into recovery and tried all kinds of things again, because people would say, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a this, I'm a that. You should come to my church. You should come to my place where I practice this other thing. And I did that. And I have a combination now. I feel comfortable saying the word God, but I also know the minute I step on the sand, that whole thing is bigger than me. I cannot make that water go in and out the way it does.
Right.
So nature is in there too.
And writing, so talk to me about then the vehicle of writing and bigger. When bigger meets writing, when writing meets bigger, what are we doing? What are we facilitating there?
Well, you want to have a conversation. And again, people who grew up in traditional religions were taught prayers or chants. They were taught some, like very conservative Judaism, there is a ritual or a prayer for every step of your day. You are talking to God. You are asking for help. You are blessing. You're asking for a blessing. It's a conversation. So with whatever your bigger is, how are you going to have that conversation? And what is often surprisingly easy for people, if they make writing with a lowercase letter, they can write a prayer.
Oh,
Some people, their journal exercise every morning is like, dear God, it's Monday. This is what I'm facing today. What do you want me to do? Kind of thing.
yeah. And to get back to our opening part of our conversation, and in there you may discover what you really believe. You may discover your book, you may discover your essay, you may discover anything, but you may have that one line. And I really do. I just want to get back to that for a second. I really do believe that. I mean, writing, and then you find this thing, right? You find this one thing and think, is that what I really think?
Right.
Oh, let's pull that out and have a look at it.
Right. And I think that's the value too, when you're writing on your project, or you're doing some daily writing. Take another couple of minutes to go back and read it. And you'll sit back and go, I never used that word before. Like, look
Never
at that
used that word.
Or I described this person in a certain way. What's that all
Right,
about?
right. Yes.
And now tomorrow I'll start with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And tomorrow I'll start with that. I could start from here because it's always available to you if you keep writing it down.
Right. The other thing I want to add, Marion, about this connection between writing about recovery and the spiritual stuff is, I don't think there are enough books yet guiding people in recovery to develop and expand their spiritual life. Because typically what we do, then we turn toward religious literature or spiritual literature, as opposed to have somebody who is an authority in those ways say, follow my path in recovery toward my spiritual development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what
Gorgeous.
does it look like today?
Yeah. Okay. So somebody just said the audio is coming in and out, so we'll move a little closer to the
Okay.
mic to make sure that that doesn't happen. Sorry about that if you're getting a different audio things. So let's talk about your top tips, or I'm not big on top tips, but what kind of encouragement or what wisdom can you give anyone who is writing in and around recovery, when you combine the two? And we've just done some of this. What's your bigger? But what else have you got? Is it you've already told us to keep a mini tape recorder, or I keep a notebook everywhere. You've talked about identifying your bigger. You've talked about there's a variety of moments that this may come to you, and you may find something amid thousands of words. One little line is all we need. But what else can you give us to encourage people to write in and around recovery?
I would say the first one, because this was absolutely true for me, is pay attention.
Oh.
Let's say you're sharing in a meeting, you're just talking about what's going on, what you're worried about, and it gets a laugh. Or later somebody says to me, when you shared this morning, I just wanted to cry, but you didn't realize you were saying a sad thing. go and write that in your notebook,
Oh, I
capture
love
that,
that.
because what was it? What generated the laughter? What generated that feeling in another person? You're on to something, and trust that. Don't brush that away. You trust that you're onto something and follow that. The other tips are, of course, make a writing habit. Make it part of your life. And that's the worthy piece. And I think this is tricky for people in recovery, because sure as shooting, we all come in feeling lower than whatever, and we don't feel worthy in general. And then we think, I wonder if I could write something. I wonder if I could write a book. I wonder if I could write an article for the paper. And the first voice is going to be you. Who do you think you are? That's the first voice, right? That follows that. So that's the one. Not only do you have to counter it, but you need a couple of loving people in your life who go, why not, honey? Give it a try. Give
I
it a
love
try.
that idea, honey.
Yeah, give it a try.
Right. Yeah, I wrote a blog post recently about the voice, because I had said in a class the other day, in the master class the other day, people were talking about how they just can't write, and everybody, the voices are telling them not to write. And I shared that my shrink at the time, years ago, when I was first married and struggling to write, he said to me, well, what's the voice? And I said, well, my mother used to tell me that no one can write with children. And he was like, okay. We have a little exercise we do for your mother. You stand in your office door and you say, you can't come in here every day before you start work. And damn, it works. Like us. And he always said, say to her, I know you're going to be there when I finish. You can yell at me later, but right now I'm just going to go write for 45 minutes. So that practice is a really important thing. I believe that the strongest pushback you can give to the resistance is a writing practice. 45 minutes a day, or 5 pages a day, or 3 pages a day. If you write 3 pages a day, 5 days a week, it's 15 pages a week, it's 60 pages a month, it's a 300-page first draft in 5 months. It can be, and we call it in my family, the vomit draft. So, people, all of us in recovery are really good with making a mess. So
Yeah.
let's just get the messy.
Capture the mess.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Get the messy.
Right.
So what else you've got
Well, I have to tell you, I have a similar, not like your mother's, but I had a therapist early on, and she was like, what's getting in the way of writing? Because I one day just told the secret that I wanted to write.
Right.
And why can't I? And she said, what we identified was this younger part of me that wanted to be safe, that you're putting yourself out there if you're a writer, and that could be very dangerous.
Oh.
So she was saying, okay, take her in the car with you when you're going to work. And that's when she chatters a lot about all the things you're not good at and can't do, and it's dangerous, you'll get us in trouble. She said, and then there's a spot on your drive to work, you literally pull the car over and you tell her, this is daycare, get out of the car, I will be back for you at 4 o'clock, because this is a child. You will honor that. You will come back and pick her up at the end of the day, but she cannot go with you on your writing day.
Oh, Diane.
And we don't beat her. We don't beat her.
No, we don't beat her. We care for her.
Right.
We say to her, yeah, I'm going to drop you off now.
But you can't make a mess in the middle of your day.
No, and you really can't come in here. That's so great. And I think there will be some people who are rolling their eyes, but trust me when I tell you this stuff works, because that is just a voice. It's an old voice. It could be in your unconscious, your subconscious. Right. It could be in your conscious world. It doesn't matter. You speak directly to it, and then you go show it. You're very confident. It doesn't have to be angry. I was a little angry with my mom, because what a terrible thing to say to your kids. I could be writing books, but for you two.
Right.
And my sister and I, between the two of us, have published 8. Just, I think, out of spite.
Showed her
our long dead mother, who, I'm hoping she knows somewhere. It's not quite true that you can't write with children. But I love that idea of dropping her off in daycare. So fabulous. Gotta love a therapist.
Oh, I know. Right. Yeah. Outside help. Very important.
Yeah. And I don't think anyone can, I think people in recovery, all of us in recovery, I don't think we can do this alone. I think we need a lot of, I don't like the word permission. I think we need a lot of support. Community support. And, I always make jokes about this, but you can't get that at home all the time. My husband is hungry at a certain hour. And if I start pitching him a story when he's hungry, it's not going to go well. I just get, great idea. What's for dinner?
Right.
But no, I was hoping for a little bit of a textured conversation here.
Right. And writers need support too. And it's not always, I've never done well in writing groups.
No.
I just haven't. I'm too introverted for that, or it's not productive for me. But you need a couple other people who I would say either are writers or artists doing some kind of creative work, where you check in with each other. You can tell them what the voices are saying, because they have voices too. Painters and playwrights all have voices. And then you can share that, have a good laugh, and then say, I'm going to go write for 45 minutes now. I'm promising you guys I'm going to go do it. And they say, well, I'm going to go to my studio now and we'll check in another day.
Yeah, there was a writer I interviewed on Cordy on my podcast a few episodes ago who's part of a silent writing group. They meet online, they all look at each other in the morning, they don't speak, and then they keep the cameras on for 3 hours, and then at the end of it, they wave
Wow.
goodbye. And I thought, what? Because there's something about community, they don't talk, but I wonder if you could start one where everybody just says, so what'd the boys tell you today?
Right,
Right?
right.
That's a lovely
And you
idea.
have a good laugh or a good
A
cry.
good laugh or a good cry, but I'm never going to get over the daycare one. So what lies ahead for people? What's the return on investment of this work? What can the writer expect to uncover, discover in this process?
So the most important return on recovery is return on investment, and recovery is you're going to learn new things about yourself, and your recovery will zip forward, as will the people around you, because as you're doing this, you're going to be sharing that in your meetings or with your sponsor, whomever. But also you're now taking a step from just straight recovery into creative work, and you are going to then get that out into the world. Because I very, there are lots of people who teach like writing for yourself. Lovely, but that's not what I'm about.
Mm-mm.
I want to be heard. It's why I go to meetings and raise my hand. I want to say it to someone else. With my writing, I want to say it to someone else. With any projects that I do, I want an audience. I want the communication. There has to be a sender and a receiver in theory. I want that receiver of some kind too. And so you get that for yourself when you write about recovery.
Yeah, I don't mistake this for an ego-based work. I don't mistake it at all for that. I believe in the telling of stories. First of all, I've always believed that after the revolution, the first thing that happens is some writer comes crawling out into the rubble and scrawls something on a wall. So after the worst of times, it's going to be a writer that leads us forward.
Right.
And I know from my own work that it's been so helpful to me to process a lot of what I was experiencing, whether it be just the terror of being a parent, which I found terrifying in the early years. So I wrote about it for the New York Daily News, or the horror of being the child of an Alzheimer's patient, or whatever, the confusion of being married, to be processing this stuff on the page. But recovery presents its very own individual pathways of insights that I think without these, my God, other people are suffering, right?
Right.
So you get the personal, you get this, you learn about yourself, but how about when you put it out there in the world? I mean, maybe you're not going to become a best-selling writer. Maybe you are. That book by Caroline Knapp continues to sell long after her death. What about the experience of the public? What can you help people with? Maybe they're afraid. Well, what if I tell my story? Then everyone's going to know I was a drunk. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think we're beginning baby steps. We're beginning to see now the public in general is having a little bit more understanding about recovery, and we can sort of see it in the jokes. Like maybe you're in a business meeting and somebody introduces themselves, and everybody in a jokey way goes, "Hi, Marion," like they know that people do in a 12-step meeting, right? Because there's a little bit of exposure. I think now most people know someone in recovery,
right?
If not a family member, a coworker, a friend, a lady down the street, and they saw the change. So there's a little bit of like, well, I don't like drunks and I don't like bulimics and I don't like this or that. But there's something about when they begin to change their lives. More people should do that.
Well, yeah, look at Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean,
oh my gosh,
she owns up to I think it was an Oxycontin addiction of 8 years, something like that. And, look at what's happening with her the last 2 weeks. I mean, she's won a SAG award, she's won a BAFTA, she's won a, whatever.
Right.
And I have to say, I'm rooting for her in no small part because of her recovery honesty.
Right.
And nobody knew that she was an addict. Her story is amazing and fascinating. And she does it with humor and grace while raising a trans child, while living in a very high profile marriage, while being in Hollywood, while working, blah, blah, blah. And she talks about this thing. And I thought, oh, well, then we all know somebody. Then we absolutely all know somebody.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful. All right. So I think it's really important to remind people that one big book that covers your family's long history of alcoholism and yours, and is a wonderful thing to shoot for, but it's not the only platform. And to have a writing life, as we say here at the Memoir Project, is to learn to write blog posts, personal essays, op-eds, long form essays, and books. You can write forever. But why don't you tell them that you can write forever within this one topic? Because no one ever believes me when I say
Right, right. Well, one writer, one woman that I'm working with right now, she came to me, not as she was in recovery, but she didn't lead with that. She is surviving the death of her young child,
Oh,
and she wanted. And so there's one of those things that many people who have grieving a loved one, they think there's so many books on grief. The world doesn't need another one. It was like, oh no, they do, because there's lots of twists and turns in grief and that process. But then she kind of said on the side, or sort of dropped this into the story, it was like, well, yes, she was in fact recovering from an eating disorder, and it was like, where let's write around that and see where that goes. And of course it was part of the story. So now she's got this, what's becoming a book on grief and her eating disorder, the intersections, the differences, what people know, what they didn't know, all of that kind of thing.
wow.
But I think all of these forms for writing, I started with a journal, then I started sharing little bits with I shared little typed sentences and paragraphs with people in early recovery. And then I discovered blog. And so I was blogging like crazy. And then I was living in Baltimore at the time. I sent something into the newspaper. I mean, I was very lucky in this way. They published, it was a Mother's Day story about recovery and quote, bad mothers, which meant addicted mothers. And what we don't know is going on in that mom's life. You know, I was writing about my mother and her addiction. And then I got to write more columns because of that one. And then the day I went into the parking lot after a meeting and crying and talking to other women about what is going on in later recovery, what is going on as we begin to move out of the woods. And people just started saying, well, there's this and there's this and there's this. And I thought, nobody's telling the rest of the women.
Right.
And I can't go meeting to meeting to tell them that's got to be a book.
Right.
You know, so I wrote those sample chapters. And
that's beautiful. I love that. I love the evolution of how you had the courage to write about it small and then build it and try it. And I genuinely believe this is true. I mean, the thing you want to shoot for is a writing life. I encourage people to think of it as a writing life. And if you write a book and you publish that book, you are best off to start with a personal essay that may or may not attract an agent or an editor. You're best off to start testing your material on the public. You're best off to see what you actually really believe you're saying. You're best off to write an op-ed on some day. We have so many addiction problems in this country right now. You're best off to keep trying, and because when the book comes out, you want to publicize it. It's not this one big book that just saves your life. You've got to publicize it. You've got to attract an agent and an editor. You've got to then publicize the fact that the book has just been published, and publicize when the paperback comes out. And you do that with essays. You do that, and you're evolving. You're writing about different things. It's not that you're just writing the same story. I've written so many pieces using my mother, the Alzheimer's patient, in the background, in the foreground, sitting in the front seat, sitting in the back seat. You know, they're all about something different, but they have the same cast of characters.
And there is a great big market out there for those essays. A lot of times people say, oh, but Newsweek, or but the, you know, Huffington Post or whatever. It's like, there's a million publications in print and online that are looking for your essay.
Yeah, there are. My agent, who I talk to all the time on behalf of my clients, just to check in with her, she always says, tell them to go where the eyeballs are. Tell them to stop waiting for the New Yorker and the New York Times. There are now websites with 400, 500,000 readers that you want to be published in. So you've got to have this writing life, people, and think about it there. So in your services, you offer a lot, and I'm going to give everybody a place where they can contact you. But you do all of this: writing coach, keynote speaker, workshop leader, conference facilitator, coaching, program administrator, podcast schedule. Whoops, no, that's not you. That's left over from the last one. She doesn't do podcast scheduling. That's too funny. We tried to edit this slide before we went live. But tell me about this retreat, which is what got us talking the other day. Tell us about this retreat you've got. You've got coming up this summer?
June. Yeah.
Wait, so tell me about
June
this.
2 to 4.
And then we're going to take some questions.
At Pyramid Life Retreat Center, which is in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. And I'm going back again this year. It's a weekend, Friday night to Sunday afternoon. And it's for women in recovery. however you would categorize your recovery. So all 12-step programs, other kinds of recovery. And it's a beautiful summer camp. So there's lots of outdoor activities. The workshop parts include talking about all different kinds of recovery, whatever the substance or behavior is, but we write. So there's optional yoga, kayaking, swimming. It's a gorgeous place. I think we were both there at the same time many years ago. So I'll be doing that. And women come from all over. There's a group in New Jersey. There's one woman, she gathers up all of her young women in recovery and brings them because she wants them to meet older women in recovery to see what the future looks like.
And how can you not want to be there? I have been there. It is in the town of Paradox. It's just
perfect name.
It's perfect for writers. It is a retreat. It's the only building on this lake. It is everything you've ever heard about in the Adirondacks. It is secluded. It is rustic, except for the accommodations are gorgeous. It is just women.
Yes.
There's singing, there's drumming, there's whatever you want to do or nothing.
Right.
The food is fabulous. But the place it's just in the perfect part of the Adirondacks. There is nobody else on this entire lake. And there are canoes and there's swimming and there's all this activity. I love this retreat. And I think you're the perfect person to be there. So I've put the URL in the chat for anybody who's interested. Just go see it. I mean, I'm just so proud of you and what the work you do.
Thank you.
And that's a beautiful thing to have. So it's this summer. It's 3 days. Is that what you said?
Yep. Friday to Sunday.
Perfect. And easy to get to. You can fly into Albany, New York, which is, pretty easy. So I want to push that. This is also how people reach you. So
yes.
We do not at the Memoir Project have a recovery coach. We have a lot of personal coaches and writing coaches now and editors. But I really want to be very clear here that I would recommend Diane and her work for anybody who's working in recovery and wants to write about it. So really, 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 here's her URL. You can get that. And now is where, let's see. Oh, we're going to take some questions. So let's see if I can break out our questions box. Look at that. It's working. So Portia jumps in and people put your questions in the questions box now. Very nice of you to hang on to them till now because I get so easily distracted. But so Portia says, it sounds like everyone must have a story to tell. Portia, I couldn't agree more. And I think everybody has a recovery from something, even if it's just that repetitive voice of your mother telling you that you can't, or that gym teacher, or that nun, or that, stern older brother.
Ex-husband.
Oh, was that an involuntary addition there, Diane? But it does sound like everybody has a story to tell. So, what else do you have to say to that?
Well, one of the things we know, we literally use the word telling your story in recovery, and a lot of times that's your using story or your drunkalogue, that kind of thing. But as we tell those stories, no two are the same. We say we identify with people because we identify with their feelings, but no two story is the same, and we're going to be helped by those.
Right.
And we also say you're as sick as your secrets because we hold on to things that we think would embarrass us or humiliate us. And then when we do tell a secret, that's often when the room laughs and they're like, oh yeah, I did that a million times. And that's the healing moment when
Absolutely.
somebody lovingly laughs at your secret.
Right. Yeah. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous experience. That is absolutely true. Heather has added here that there's even grief recovery. And you're absolutely right, Heather. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So I think there's a recovery from almost everything. And I think that whole concept that whole conversation we had early on about what was the phrase you used for the
all-encompassing recovery?
All-encompassing. Beautiful. Absolutely. All-encompassing recovery. All right. Let's see. So Portia says retreats now always bring to mind a new spooky thriller. There's a book, apparently The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. Somebody turned it into a thriller. Oh no, that's too much. Almira asks, what is op-eds? I can assume, but never heard that term. Oh, okay, Almira. We actually teach an op-ed class here at the Memoir Project. Op-ed means opposite the editorial page of your newspaper, not opinion editorial. It means appears opposite the editorial page. And it was established in the 1970s by the New York Times, if I remember correctly. It is traditionally where readers like you get to write pieces and be the writers in those pages. And so you don't have to be a former Joint Chief of Staff or former whatever. If you put a kid on a school bus this morning, you know what it's like to deal with fear in this country, and we want to hear from you. If you adopted a dog during COVID, and now you're struggling because you had to go back to work, we want an op-ed from you about the compromises and sacrifices you're making to keep that dog. It is something having to do with what's going on in the world and your take on it. So we teach a class here at the Memoir Project in the op-ed. We teach it once a month, and I love op-eds. And I can tell you this: many of my students have, from well-placed op-eds, gotten agents and editors. It's a great way to test your material on the public. So how about you? Have you written opinion pieces?
I have, and they, in some ways, they're like little essays, and that they are that place to test your material, because many newspapers, people will write back to you.
Yep.
Right. And they'll agree with you, they'll disagree with you, they'll tell you why you're right, wrong, crazy. But that's feedback on your project.
Right.
Because one of the things I absolutely know is nobody sits down to email the writer unless they were moved in some way. Like,
Right.
she's crazy, I got to tell her. They were moved. I always feel like I won. I won.
Right. I can tell you also, Almira, 2 of my 4 books came out of shorter pieces that I wrote. My first book, published in my 20s, came out of a magazine piece, but my most recent book and my most successful book came out of a blog post that I wrote that went viral. And it was my sister who said, it went viral, write another one like that. And it was just about how to write memoir. And I wrote another one, and she then said, you should write a book on how to write memoir. And my whole business was born out of that moment. So and I can tell you this, that 3 of my clients have published the Modern Love column in the New York Times, and all 3 had agents by the end of the week. So it's a really effective way. So Abigail asks, how do you negotiate writing a recovery story when recovery is a process, something ongoing, not a done and dusted state? My negative voice says, I'm not over it yet. How can you write about it? But it's never complete.
Right. And all of us in recovery want to know where you are right now, because you're either at 90 days or you're at 9 years or you're at 39 years, and we want to know about that. Of course, it's not over, but you're going to get to write another book in 9 more years or in 5 more years. Like, you probably have more than one book in you, you know.
Right. And I think the particulate matter is what's interesting. I mean, in other words, I don't like the tied with a bow. I don't trust memoir where people say, and that's it, that's all, we're done. It's like, no, I want to read about the process. I want to hear where you are. And that's what the personal essay is so great for, is capturing right now. It's just like weighing a moment of your life. Lisa says, it took me 40 years of personal growth to excavate the truth of my sugar addiction. Having completed a first draft of my memoir, I am now rewriting it from the point of view of recovering from sugar. Oh, God bless you, Lisa. That's a huge topic. Do you think the world is ready to read about recovering from sugar addiction? I can tell you it is, Lisa. Every illness is, not every, I shouldn't say that. Many illnesses are inflammation based, and the whole connection between like Alzheimer's and diabetes, for instance, is only still just being plumbed. We need to understand what sugar is doing to us, and I think that's a great idea. What do you think, Diane?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say, look at social media, look at the jokes about sugar, look at I'm going to go home and I'm going to get these donuts and eat this pie and buy this candy. Years ago, the jokes were, I'm a mom who has wine in my water bottle, and we ha ha ha, and it's mom wine time, because we were beginning to understand women who drank secretly. Now we're understanding the secret sugar addictions. Of course, we need this book. There's lots of us want to know, how do I manage my sugar addiction?
Right. And what's the damage of sugar? My best friend is Gary Taubes, Taubes, and he's the premier science writer in America. And his whole shtick is sugar and food. So look at Gary's work. He does serious science books on sugar. But boy, Lisa, I think the time is absolutely right for that. Heather adds that to her original comment, which is, there's grief therapy, there's even being a daughter recovery. And boy, oh boy, did I have to peel back from the things my mother said to me. Whoo boy. So Ben asks, a lot goes into recovery: spirituality, the work, personal growth. How do you recommend honing the focus of a memoir down to a few key ideas?
I think this is going to come in your writing practice. You're going to find that you tend to write about the spiritual practices. You tend to write about certain parts of your personal growth, and that's going to kind of tell you, oh, like that's my niche, that's my angle, that's my place to go.
Yeah, I always ask the writers I work with, what interests you most? What
Yeah.
about this interests you most? Oh, one said to me recently, there's this brain changing that's going on in my head. I really want to write about that. Okay, then do a little research and dive into that. Paul asks, I've almost completed my first recovery memoir. Do you have a suggestion for someone that specializes in recovery memoirs? Well, Diane, first of all, I would speak to somebody. I'd speak to Diane. I gave you her URL. Definitely go back. Let me give you Diane's URL again so you can just contact her. And I think it's a good idea. And if you mean which publisher or which editor or which agent, it's a really good idea to go and look at the bookstore of who gets thanked in the most recent
Always, always,
popular book,
always.
right? And I mean, that's not Caroline Knapp because that book is now many years old and her agent may or may not still be in business, but find out who was thanked in the book, right? That works. Okay. Vera asks, can it be a recovery from self-loathing?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right. And so what we want to know is you at some point you understood that there was self-loathing. What did you do about it? That's what we want to hear.
right. Abigail asks what platforms are for personal essays, op-eds, long form essays. What would they be? So there is a niche publication for everything. What you want to do is go on Google and do a demographic search for yourself, basically. And you put in 10 top websites for mothers, Jewish mothers. Let's say one of my clients did that. She landed at Kveller, Kveller, where she's written a bunch of pieces. You want to just identify yourself and find the top websites because these have more eyeballs on them than the New Yorker these days, and that's where you want to be writing. What do you
Right.
think?
Google is your friend. I say this to people all the time. Where to submit op-eds, you can literally get an email address list for that.
Yes. Kathy asks if I have an essay writing class. I do. Kathy, we now at the Memoir Project, I can tell you that you don't have to go anyplace else. We have an intro to memoir writing class, and I have a class called The Art of the Personal Essay. If you go to marionroach.com, click on the upper right-hand corner where it says classes, you will see a wholly redone classes page that has the personal essay class included. That's how I started my career, is writing personal essays. Let's see. Long form essays, Abigail asks. I'm not sure which context one would put one out there. So there's a place called Long Form. Actually, I think it's called maybe it's longform.org that runs long form personal essays. The New Yorker runs a piece called Personal History, but they don't take on solicited manuscripts. So you've got to go and search for places online that still run the long form essay, of which there are a bunch. Sarah asks, this probably reveals some of the continued recovery work I need to do related to people pleasing. Gulp. Yes, Sarah, me, you, Diane, and every woman I know. But I am anxious about how others will critique my recovery as I write about it in my book. How do you receive such critiques while both having an open and yet guarded heart? Oh, that's a beautiful phrase, an open yet guarded heart.
So the very first thing that you have to do is pretend that all those people are dead. This was like the best advice people
Kill them
gave
all.
me.
Yep.
Tell the truth in those first couple of drafts, and you'll have multiple drafts. Tell the absolute truth from your point of view. Later you can edit, but if you edit those people or the way your self-presentation while you're writing, it'll flatten the writing and people will know. They will know something's missing, that something's not true. So put it all in, then go back later, and you'll have many times to edit and with the editor of the publisher and say, let me phase that a little bit or color that one a little bit. But first, in your first drafts, tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Ignore all those other people, act as if they're not there.
And don't show it to anybody
Right,
that's involved
right,
with your
right.
story. My rule is never share your work with anyone who depends on you for food, shelter, or sex. And because they're going to get neat or good or I don't get it, which doesn't help. So you want to be working with Diane, you want to be working with me, you want to be working with somebody who is invested in your success, period. That isn't necessarily your sister, your husband, your lover, your partner, because they don't have the cred. And so this isn't an upsell as much as it's an offer of a supportive community. You've got to be with people who are invested in your success. I run a masterclass where everybody becomes so close to one another that there's one group of people that have stayed together for 18 years after the class was taught because they are helping each other get published every day. So you want to get into a group of people that do that. Heather asks, where do you suggest writing blogs that will get seen? There seems to be either you create a website and write on it for you to find a place to guest blog. Is that right? I think there's a piece missing for me about this. So blogging is, it's not as popular as it once was, but I'm a huge believer in testing your material on the public. So if it's the way to get you writing about yourself, and then you're going to be ready to go publish the stuff elsewhere, then I still believe it's a good thing to have. What do you think, Diane?
I agree, because you'll polish that piece a little bit. I mean, the nice thing about blogging is you can be pretty quick. You can write it today, edit it a little bit, put it up there. But then this is where the intersection with social media comes in, because I use Blogspot. So I put something on Blogspot, then I go on Facebook and I say, I got something up there on Blogspot. Go take a look.
Right. Yeah. You do have to get a little agile with social media. Don't be afraid of it. I interviewed Kayla Raquel recently. She's a social media self-publishing guru. I interviewed her both on Qwerty, my podcast, which is, I think we're 94 episodes in. If you don't know Qwerty, it's QWERTY. It's on iTunes. It's on every single platform. But on MarionRoach.com, I run every single transcript and the player. So if you don't know how to download a podcast, it's right there. Go listen to Shayla about why you need social media and how easy it is to start. Larry asks, can you top this in writing about your rock bottom? Oh, Larry, such a great question. How do you avoid sounding virtuous or judgy in one's recovery?
So the reality, Larry, is like there is always somebody higher and lower than you. So you're not going to be the top or the bottom. The other thing that's important is to not sound preachy or judgy, is tell us the truth. Tell us your truth. Tell us or hint about your secrets, because then we'll know you're a real person and not preaching at us.
Right. That's a beautiful piece of advice. Laura asks, what about the spirit of anonymity in 12-step programs? How can we write basements of churches, etc., but it's clear to everyone that we are in the 12-step rooms? How have you grappled with keeping the spirit of anonymity, not just finding a euphemism?
So the not just the spirit, but the rule from Alcoholics Anonymous International is, we do not say I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. We say I'm in 12-step recovery. I'm in a recovery program. I went to a program or meetings to help me with my eating disorder. We can be that direct. If you want to kind of cover it even more, you can say I went and got help from groups. None of those are violations of anonymity.
Right. I think that's a really important, and not naming names is really important. We are so much more accepting, I think, of recovery than we used to be. But I think Diane's advice is so beautiful about the spectrum, the broad spectrum. Yoda asks, as a writing coach, what are some concrete ways you support your clients as they deep dive into recovery?
So one of the things that I make very clear when somebody's coming to me as a writing client, that this is writing client. I'm not their sponsor. I'm not going to meet them at meetings. Of course, the
Right.
content and the material will be about recovery, but I'm not going to say, how many meetings did you go to this week?
Right.
But I might say, what did you write about and what did you learn this week? And how is that coming into your manuscript?
That's an important distinction. So we're going to take the last question, and then we're going to thank Diane like crazy. Betsy asks, how can I write without being a know-it-all? Betsy, I love that, because nobody, I used to hate those mommy bloggers who were perfect. I always wrote with like boogers on my shirt. I remember being at early in motherhood, looking down, and my shoes were mismatched, literally. I mean, I always wrote from that place of, I'm wrong, I'm learning, I'm doing a kind of not so great job at this. But what about the know-it-all thing?
Well, one of the best things that I have seen good writers in recovery do is put that right up front. Like, some days I feel like a know-it-all. Some days I worry people will think I'm being a know-it-all, but I'm not, because some days I have boogers all over my shirt. Or some days, I mean, I wrote about this in Out of the Woods, which is, I can sit in a meeting and sound like really wise and really spiritual. And then the next day I am swearing at my husband as I leave the apartment. And I think, oh, thank God the group can't see me now.
Yeah, there you go. Know it all too, while not knowing so much.
Show us the scenes.
Right. That's it. Show us the scenes. All right. Well, Diane, thank you.
I loved being here.
This
Thank
was
you,
great.
Marian.
We may need to turn this into a regular thing. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Thank you to everybody who came along. Please do go visit Diane at at the URL I've showed you there. It's a wonderful experience to work with her, I know. And if you let me just show you the Pyramid Life. Here's the registration there, and I also put it up in the chat so you can join her for a weekend of work, which I cannot recommend more highly. It's a beautiful place. Diane's a fabulous, gorgeous human being who will get you to your writing life. All right, everybody. Thanks a million for coming along. You've got your recording coming tomorrow. Come back. We've got the next one we're going to do. I'll let you know the dates for the next episode of this, but thank you so much for this meaningful day for me. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.